Hello everyone, hope you are doing well. I am Akshay Brahmar, Assistant Professor at LG Institute of Engineering and Technology in IT ICT Department. Welcome back to the video tutorial series of the Internet of Things, right? In our previous session, we have talked much about the cloud for the data storage and the analysis process, right? But you have one question arise, sir, how can we select that particular cloud and how can we select that particular cloud service provider, right? So yes, the today's session is here for satisfy your that answer, right? So in this session we are going to discuss about how to select that cloud service provider and what are the things that we need to keep in mind while selecting the cloud service provider, right? So for that we have several criteria for selecting a particular cloud service provider, right? So let's begin with that, right? So selection of the cloud service provider. First of all, there are many parameters to select a cloud service providers from the numerous service providers, right? So yes, you are all aware about that. So there are the number of the companies which is offering that offering us a cloud services, right? So from that, which company is best suitable for as per our requirement, right? So that we need to bifurcate, right? So that we need to distinguish and we need to select that company only, right? So it is advisable to consider the following parameters while selecting the cloud service provider, right? So there are the so many parameters by which you can choose that cloud service provider among all. The first one is a certification and the standard compliance, right? After that, the financial health of the service provider, right? So what is the financial health of that particular cloud service provider, right? So we need to keep in mind that too. After that, the business and the technology strength, right? So what is this business and the technology strength for that particular cloud service provider? We need to keep in mind that too. After that, the compliance audit, service level agreement, reporting and tracking, costing and the billing, maintenance, the maintenance, monitoring and the upgradation, support and the health, security. All are the major following parameters by which you can choose that cloud service provider as per your requirement, right? So let's see each of the parameter one by one and let's see what this particular parameter means and how we can use that parameter to choose our cloud service provider, right? So let's begin with an certification and the standard compliance, right? So when a product follows the standard, right, so that are acceptable widely, it is considered as a reliable product, right? So what do you mean by the reliable product, right? So when that particular product is following some kind of standards and that is acceptable widely, right, so then we can say that that product is a reliable product, right? So the cloud service provider are expected to comply with the standards, right? Because the product with the standards are accepted widely and it is considered as a reliable product, right? So for that product reliability, the cloud service provider must need to follow some standards, right? Industry accepted standards are the first criteria for selecting a cloud service provider, right? If your cloud service provider is following some standards, then it is acceptable widely, right? So then after you can choose that particular cloud service provider. Though there are many standards framed and followed by the industry. Though there are many standards framed and followed by the industry. Some of the main standards for the clouds are ISO, OCC, IEEE, SNIA, Cloud Storage Initiative, and all are the very famous standards for cloud, right? So we can select that particular cloud service provider which are following some standards, right, and which are widely acceptable, right? So with the help of that we can ensure that this product and this particular cloud service provider will provide us a reliable service, right? So that's about a certification in the standard. After that, the financial health of the service provider, right? So in this particular era, in this particular pandemic, right, so you have observed that in this particular corona pandemic, right, so lot many companies are survived in the industry, right? So the service provider should hold in sufficient funding to operate business for long period, right? So whenever you are choosing any service provider, it should have sufficient funding to operate a business for a long period, right? If that service provider has a healthy financial status and history of the sustenance, then it is most unlikely to be shut down, right? So when when a particular service provider is having an efficient funding, right? So then it will be sustained in the market for the long period, right? And the shutdowning of that particular company is really less, right? So with the help of that, we can choose that particular service provider, right, which will ruling in the market or which will be staying in the market for the long period, right? After that, the third criteria is in business and the technology strength, right? So what do you mean by that business and the technology strength, right? So having a technical expertise to sustain and adapt to the client requirement is a key factor in selecting a cloud service provider, right? So what is the key factor for selecting a cloud service provider? Having the technical expertise to sustain and adapt to the client's requirement, right? So with the help of that, we can get to know that the client's requirement, right? So having just a technical skill and the strength doesn't help. The cloud service provider needs and business skill as well as to sustain, right? So business skills include that growth planning, the financial planning, and other factors that are required to sustain into the market, right? So for the sustain in the market for the long period, we need a business planning, right? So growth planning and the financial planning kind of thing, right? So with the help of that company will be survive into the market for the long period of the time, right? So that company have a business and a technology strength for that, right? After that, the fourth criteria is a compliance audit, right? So the cloud service provider must validate the compliance with the client's requirement, right, which should be done through the proper third party audit, right? Whenever the cloud service provider want to validate the compliance with the client's requirement, then it should be how you can ensure that with the third party audit, the proper third party audit will ensure that the client's requirement is fulfilled there, right? So this will enable the transparency and the perfect validation, right? So the compliance audit is must needed there. After that, the fifth criteria is a service level agreement, right? So the service level agreement, the SLS provides a detailed information about which kind of service which will be being provided by the particular cloud service provider, right? So all the information is listed into the SLA, the service level agreement. The SLA also indicates the real value that customer gets out of them, right? And SLA serves a legal contract, right? So the SLA serves a legal contract, define the terms and condition and the relationship between the two parties, right? All the details are mentioned into the service level agreement, right? After that, the sixth criteria is reporting and the tracking. The service provider should be capable for issuing that complete performance report, which is also highlights the problem, right? This will enable the customer to understand the complete situation, right? So the reporting and the tracking is a must needed there. After that, the seventh criteria is in costing and the billing, right? So the costing and the billing should be transparent and should provide a complete detail of the usage, right? So the detail of the each and every small usage is really transparent by whenever the particular cloud service provider is maintaining its log, right? And with the help of that billing and the costing will be really transparent, right? It is expected to automate it with the detail of the complete resource utilization, right? So that is the thing which is maintained by the cloud service provider, and it should be having a clarity along with a breakup, right? This means that the billing should be transparent and for the usage only. This is the major factor for selecting a cloud service provider, right? If your cloud service provider is giving and you a transparent system, right? So where the costing and the billing is done with regards to your usage only, right? So that is user friendly, right? So at that time you don't need to pay more if you haven't used their resources, right? So whatever the resources you have used, you need to charge for that only, right? So that is done by the cloud service provider, right? The eighth criteria is in maintenance, monitoring and upgradation, right? It should be easy and less expensive to migrate to the cloud service provider's environment, right? So when there is an upgrade, it should be done with as any maintenance should be easy and affordable, right? In short, it should be easier to install, manage, maintain and upgrade, right? So whenever you can easily install, manage, maintain and upgrade your system, right? So it is really user friendly, right? And you can attract your customer more. This upgrade includes a migration from the private to public cloud or to the hybrid cloud, right? If there is a need, right? So if you upgrade is needed and transfer your data from one destination to another destination, it should be easy. The ninth criteria that we need to follow is then support, right? So it is help and assistance should be provided when it is required, right? Support should be available based on the agreement and the dedicated resources. The support level based on the complexity of the problem, and on-site support may be needed when the clarification cannot be offered over the phone or online, right? So if you cannot understand its solution whenever you are calling that customer calling office, or they are sharing their and they are giving them advice to how you can solve that particular problem online, right? If the customer is unable to solve that problem, right, so then that on-site support system is needed, right? Thus the support is major deciding factor for selecting the service provider, right? The ninth criteria is security, right? The infrastructure, the both hardware as well as the software should be secure. If the infrastructure, the both hardware and the software should be secure, right? If your infrastructure is not secure, then your data can be compromised, right? And that can be lead to the huge market loss. There should be defined policy about the security that should also be shared with the customer. This includes everything from access restriction to the customer data. The data should be safe in case of breakdown or the failure, right? When you are in the downtime, that data of the customer must need to be secure at that time, right? Then if there is a breakdown, right, the recovery and the backup option should be sound good, right? The physical infrastructure has to be safeguarded as well, right? And all these factors would require an audit which should be carried out by the third party only, right? And security is a prime concern about, and the security is a prime concern, and that cannot be ignored while selecting the cloud service provider, right? So that are the basic criteria, or we can say that the parameter which we will keep in mind to select a cloud service provider, right? So whenever you are selecting to migrate, or you are selecting to store your data or process your data onto the cloud, or you want to migrate your data from the local system to the cloud, or you want to migrate your data from the private cloud to the public cloud or hybrid cloud, so at that time how you can select that particular service provider? With the help of these parameters you can select that particular cloud service provider, right? So that particular criteria you need to keep in mind while you are selecting that cloud service provider if you want to migrate your or local processing device to the cloud, right? So that's all about today's session. Thank you for the watching.